Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, as we've been hearing, David Cameron says he's fighting like mad to secure a new deal for Britain in Europe. But there are growing suspicions that he is fighting and losing. So where does this leave the Tories over our EU membership? One of the government's most outspoken Brussels sceptics is Iain Duncan Smith, the Welfare Secretary, who was also at the centre of recent controversies over tax credits and the welfare bill. And he joins me now. Welcome to you. Hello. If the papers are not entirely wrong, it's been a rough few weeks for the negotiations on Europe. They've been put off until next year, the possible timings of it. What's the mood like?
Well, the mood is actually very upbeat and very good. I think I'm involved in putting together the package that the Prime Minister wants to take to the Council. So we've been deep in discussion about that. The Prime Minister has been pretty clear throughout that he wants to take a package that supports the manifesto commitment. So in my area, for example, on welfare, he's very clear that he wants to have that commitment to people living here and contributing to the system, and that will be one of the key elements of the negotiation.
So this is the 4-year moratorium. If you're a worker from inside the EU but outside Britain and you come here to work, you don't get any in-work benefits for 4 years.
Yes, I think most people listening to this, most of the British public, would ask the question, why, if you haven't contributed, if you haven't been here in the UK, should you be able to walk in and actually select which country you go to for the benefit you receive? So this would actually bring an end to the idea of what we call benefit tourism. And actually, so we don't mind people working, we mind people claiming off British taxpayers for things that they didn't deserve.
So from your point of view, is this the acid test of these negotiations?
Well, there's a lot of things in this negotiations. Sure. There's not just one thing, but
is this absolutely, well, put it right, is this crucial?
Well, I know that the Prime Minister has made it crucial to himself in the sense that he's always talked about, you know, what we have to deliver. And it's quite important. I noticed during the newspaper reviews, Rohan made it very clear the Prime Minister's making a speech reminding the Conservatives that we were elected on a manifesto and we need to deliver on that manifesto regardless of the state of the opposition. And of course the manifesto commitments were very clear on this. The Prime Minister's been clear about that from the word go. So I'm a little surprised about the newspaper articles today because I think the Prime Minister's been pretty clear from the start of this. He wants to deliver what he said he was going to deliver at the time of the election.
But there's also a suggestion in today's papers that if he doesn't get what he wants, including this 4-year moratorium, he would be prepared to lead to the Out campaign, which to a lot of people watching seems completely incredible.
Well, do you know, I always take articles written about these things with a bit of a pinch of salt. What I do know categorically is the Prime Minister has made it clear from the beginning that he was not prepared, and he said this before, so I'm a little surprised as to why this has become a story. He said that he's not prepared to come back with a deal that he did not think would deliver on his commitments and would benefit Britain, and he's been after reforming the European Union, changing things in the welfare area and making sure that we get a much better system in Europe for us as well as for the rest of the European Union. I can tell you actually, when I do go round a lot, I was in Germany not so long ago, talked to the French, when you get down to it, behind closed doors, almost every single developed country, particularly developed country in Europe, actually wants to see some kind of end to the idea of people just popping around and taking benefits in different countries. They know that. Germany is very strong about that.
You say you're not sure why this is a story at the moment. I can help you, I think, on this subject, because every time David Cameron is sitting in that chair or another chair and he's asked about this, he avoids the possibility of him ever leading the campaign against British membership of Europe. It seems to be a one-way thing. And I just wonder if the mood has indeed changed slightly in the last few weeks.
No, I think that, again, it depends how you phrase these things. But to be honest with you, I have complete faith in the Prime Minister wanting to deliver on what he said he would at the time of the election. And let's remember, and I think it's worth reminding my colleagues and everybody else, it's the Prime Minister who has done something which people like me and others have been asking for years, which is a referendum on whether we should stay in the European Union or be outside the European Union. Every other government has shifted away from that, dipped their shoulders. He didn't. He's given us this. So that's a huge starting point. On top of that, he's always said from the word go that he wasn't just going to go over and go through the motions. He actually wanted to deliver something that really benefited Britain. And every single listener out there, viewer, will actually have the right to make that decision. Not just me, not anybody else, but they.
But right now it's hard pounding, clearly. Can I ask in a little bit more detail about this benefits proposal? Because what we're told is that not only are lots of other European leaders against it at the moment, but also even if it went through, it would be illegal under European law to discriminate against people who are not your own citizens in this way. Do you understand that to be true?
Well, it's actually, like all these things, when you get down to it, it's not quite as true as that. Let's start, for example, universal credit coming in now already is classed as a social assistance programme in the European Union, and that means it will deliver on 2 or 3 of the items that we want to, there's more to come. So, for example, the child elements under universal credit, unlike tax credit, cannot be exported. The second, as they are at the moment, somebody coming in and can send their money home on child elements, even if they're not accompanied. That can't happen under universal credit. Secondly, under universal credit, you won't be able to claim unemployment benefit, no matter how long you've been here. That's a reality. So there's 2 very, very important areas that are actually already delivered. So there are other things the Prime Minister's talking about, which is this being here and contributing. That goes into things like child benefit, etc. But universal credit delivers already on some of that.
But there are still legal problems, and it's been suggested one way round this might be to say, right, nobody gets in-work benefits until they've been working for 4 years, including British citizens. So younger British people could have to work for 4 years before they get benefits in order to ensure that this covered the Europe-wide legality.
Well, the good news is that universal credit already says that nobody from outside of the UK will be able to claim the benefits for being out of work. Once that comes in, they won't anyway be able to do that.
So why are we having this argument then?
It's the in-work element of it that is the debate, because the European Union assumes that that in-work supplement, which is at the moment tax credit, part of which will now become universal credit, that should be payable to anybody who comes in to take up any kind of work. So that's
I go back to my original
debate.
question. How would you, as Welfare Secretary, react to a proposal to remove in-work benefits from British people who hadn't worked for 4 years either, in order to get round the legal problem?
Well, this has never been part of our proposal. As I say, we'll wait and see what
Would you be against
decided.
it? Would you be against it?
I'm not going to put a position down on this in the sense that I say to you this, Andrew, I'm in the business with the Prime Minister of delivering what the Prime Minister said he wanted at the time of the election through the manifesto, and what he has said clearly to his European colleagues is we need to do this. The delay, which everyone said, oh, it's a sign of weakness, I think it's a sign of strength. It says the Prime Minister is determined not just to come back with any deal, but to come back with a deal that he knows he can sell to the British people, and that, I think, speaks volumes about his determination.
If you get what you collectively want on welfare changes, would that be enough for you to want to stay inside the EU? Would you campaign to stay in rather than to get out?
I've always said that, as every single viewer of this programme will, I think, reach the same conclusion, which is, at the moment when the deal is on the table, that is when you assess whether you think it's in the benefit of Britain to stay in the European Union or leave. And I've always said, look, my judgment is at that moment my position will become very, very clear, but it's hugely dependent on what we get back.
OK, but for you, issues like parliamentary sovereignty, getting out from under the ECJ, the European Court of Justice, those are very important issues too.
Yes, all my political life I have campaigned on the idea that the European Union should never be a state. It should never become a superstate. That's why I was very against the idea of joining the euro. It's the Conservatives that said we wouldn't join the euro. We haven't. We're never going to join the euro. And that's become obvious. Thank God we didn't. Look what happened to Greece and to Italy, who had deficits that were large. We'd be in a terrible state. So, you know, this whole idea about being an independent state but cooperating and trading, that lies at the heart of it. The definition of what that means is what this negotiation is all about.
You have been critical of the whole European project, the way it's been developing towards, as you would see it, a superstate of some kind. And lots of other people inside continental Europe now agree with that. Marine Le Pen has given a very, very interesting interview today saying that Brexit, British exit from the EU, would be like the Berlin Wall falling. You bring down the whole thing, and a good thing too. How would you react to that?
Well, I never really read or listen to anything that Marine Le Pen or her party say. I think they have such odious views elsewhere as well.
She might yet become President of France.
Well, I don't have a vote in that election, so you'll forgive me if I don't. But however, on the principle and the issue of it, the reality has been that now you have really 2 bits of Europe already within the European Union. You have those who are in the euro, who require deeper and closer and tighter ties and taxation, all the rest of it, and those who are outside, of which Britain is the leading part, who don't require that. So that is, of course, the basis for why you need to have a reformed Europe, because you now have different types of Europe within the European Union. So for those who say we mustn't touch it, you know, my answer is behind closed doors, every European nation knows in Europe that there are differentials. For example, the other day, you had Eastern Europe being caucused against by those who are in the euro and being forced to take migrants when they didn't want it. So one of the issues is you shouldn't be able to caucus against people who are outside the euro.
And what kind of inner group have we got and all of that? Can I move to welfare? Because after the autumn statement, there's a general feeling that people at the bottom of the heap had the big threat of the tax credit cuts removed from them. But subsequently, there's been reports from both the Resolution Foundation and the IFS saying that those same people will be just as worse off because of universal credit by the end of this Parliament. The Resolution Foundation says average families at that end of the scale will be £1,000 a year worse off. Is that true?
Well, first of all, let me just explain something, because I'm going to answer this. I don't believe it is. The Resolution Foundation, for example, didn't take into consideration childcare, etc., which they admitted. And so these figures are very movable. The point I want to make is, first of all, at the budget, the levels of the taper, that's the withdrawal rates, and also the allowances, that's how much you can earn before you have money taken away in universal credit, were set. Nothing has changed to those at all. So that element...
And that was a fight you had with George Osborne and won.
Those were discussions that we'd had at the time, and we stabilised that at the time of the budget back at the beginning of this Parliament. The rest of this discussion about tax credits has had next to no effect on what universal credit delivers. So there's no change to what universal credit is delivering in the deficit year at all as a result of the tax credit changes.
The IFS said that by the end of this period, there's no doubt that families at the bottom will be considerably worse off than they would have been had the current system continued.
Well, two elements, first of all. Nobody will lose any money on arrival on universal credit from tax credits because they're cash protected, which means there's transitional protection. They won't be losing any money. We agreed that. I argued for that at the time. The Chancellor agreed that. This goes back a few years, so that is all in place. Nobody loses a penny, unlike they would have done under tax credits if they do. And you've got to remember, universal credit is not tax credits. Universal credit is six benefits. It's a much bigger benefit. You know, it has housing benefit in it, for example. It has child elements in it. It has all sorts of bits and pieces which are nothing to do with tax credit.
So the IFS has just misunderstood it.
Well, it's an unemployment benefit as well. Take, for example...
No, but sorry, I'm coming back to the IFS. They have misunderstood this because they say people will be worse off.
There were always some... For example, tax credits subsidise massively somebody at 16 hours work, thing that I thought was terrible, and occasionally at 30 hours. So look, at 16 hours, they had a very low taper rate. But if they went into 17, 18 or 19, they lost nearly 100% of their earnings, just short of that. Under universal credit, that will not happen. People get quite confused by taper rates.
Well, exactly my point. I still want to carry on to the very simple question.
My point is there were always points under tax credits that were more generous than universal credit because that was the nature.
Some will be, but that's
always, and that's why we protected them. The truth is, what universal credit does, as we show in the reports that have been published this week, which I think have been released to this programme, that under universal credit, more people go into work faster, they stay in work longer, and they earn more money. These are the independent reviews that are now coming forward showing universal credit is a massive progressive.
Right. Let's ask about one other thing. I know that Leytonstone is part of your area, as it were. After this appalling attack in the station, first of all, what are your reflections about it in terms of security? One-off people grabbing a knife and going into a shopping centre or a tube station. No one can protect against that, can they?
This is my borough, and of course it grieves me to think that this kind of incident took place in there. I know the police work incredibly hard. We have an anti-gangs programme there, which I've worked very hard on. It's not party political, so across the board with the council. I don't know what the circumstances of this incident are. I understand that they're treating it as a terrorist attack, but it's an abomination to think of somebody doing this, whatever the circumstances are. But, you know, this is one of the good reasons why, under the budget changes, under the spending review, we haven't cut the police budget, and the police will get the money that's necessary for them to be able to secure the areas that might be most threatened by terrorist attacks.
A lot of people watching are simply quite scared about going into public spaces using public transport at the moment. What's your message to them?
I think it's a very strong message, which is we cannot let these sort of people, terrorists, etc., actually dominate our space. The fact is that the way we defeat them at the end of the day is that our values, our freedom of expression, our freedom of belief, our freedom of association, the freedom that capitalism brings to us, our ability to take our children, our families out at Christmas, none of that must be curtailed, because at the end of it all, that is the reason why they attack us, because we have a moderate state that believes in help and assistance to people and doesn't actually believe in this totalitarian idea, which was described brilliantly by Hilary Benn the other day as a fascist concept, a fascist regime that we're up against, and we've always had to fight fascism, and the best way is to show that our values are far better than those of the fascist regime.
Iain Duncan Smith, we'll talk more after the news, but for now, thank you very much indeed. Over to Roger for the news headlines.
Andrew, thank you. A prominent Labour MP has called for a more respectful tone to debate within the party. Tristram Hunt, who left the front bench when Jeremy Corbyn became leader, said people were frustrated by the current divisions, and he called on the different wings of the party to pull together rather than fighting each other.
We need to have a big and active debate, but when you do get members of parliament having to call in police protection to their family, then I think we've crossed a line. And I think some of the ugly comments surrounding the Stop the War coalition, for example, I think they've been very irresponsible with their language and activities.
There is severe flooding across parts of Cumbria and southern Scotland this morning, with waters continuing to rise and dozens of severe flood warnings still in place, meaning that there is a risk to life. Hundreds of homes and businesses have been evacuated, roads are underwater and some towns have been cut off. Floodwaters are expected to reach their peak between now and midday. That's all from me for now. The next news here on BBC One is at 1 o'clock. Back to you, Andrew.
Many thanks. Now, Iain Duncan Smith is still with me, as is Tristram Hunt. Tristram, we were just watching you on the news there, having a real go at Stop the War and so forth. Your leader is going to break bread with them soon as their special or honorary guest at an event. Wouldn't it be sending a strong message about the kind of abuse that you've been talking about for him to decide not to go there?
Yes, very much so. I don't think he should go there. Stop the War coalition picketed the Labour Party headquarters when we were trying to run a phone bank for the Oldham by-election. So they were preventing the election of a Labour Member of Parliament. We've also seen some pretty ugly comments from them about Hilary Benn and the fact that Hilary Benn should be sacked. So I think
Can't
it would
walk safely in the streets of Leeds ever again, I think was one of the comments.
I mean, and also actually their comments about Islamic State, their comments about how the French almost had it coming to them. I think they're a really disreputable organisation, and I would hope Jeremy would step back and not go to their fundraiser.
Iain Duncan Smith, we were talking about universal credit just now. It's been a long process, probably longer and slower and possibly even more expensive than you'd have liked. How long is it now before we actually see universal credit across the country properly rolled out?
Well, 2 points. First of all, it's actually cheaper now in delivery than it was originally forecast to be, so it'll cost less. But it's already rolling out. I can tell you there are 250,000 people now receiving universal credit.
They're the easy ones, aren't they? They're the single people, not the families, not the complicated cases.
The plan that we set, deliberately done, I'll never, ever, do a big bang approach where everything happens at once, is that you do it stage by stage. So in each area as you roll it out, you learn the lessons, you make the adjustments. So it'll be complete in every single job centre by early next year, and then we start the full expansion of all the other benefits. Everything will be shut down by the end of 2018 for new entrants, and then you migrate all those who are on the other benefits that are relevant to that at the same time. But it's just had a review, an internal review, which has given it an amber rating, which says it's right on track to do what it should do, and it's the right way to do it.
Amber can mean you're about to stop as well as about to go.
No, what I say, no, we'll go very strong. It's actually said it's the way that all benefits should be rolled out in the future.
You have very, very different policy solutions. Do you both share moral outrage about the discrepancies between wealth and poor in this country?
I mean, the discrepancy about wealth and poverty, which is growing at the moment. When you look at the charts, actually, we're seeing more inequality, not just in Britain, but across the Western world. And how you have policies to deal with that is the core of Labour's purpose. But where you have a Conservative government which thinks its priority is to cut inheritance tax for the very richest properties, whilst also closing Sure Start centres, which help the most disadvantaged, I just think that's morally wrong. I think those are the wrong choices.
The first thing that ever happens, of course, is that you have to have an economy that functions and works. The second thing, under the present government, I just want to put a real figure on the table, income inequality is now lower than it was under the last government. It's been falling through the last 5 years.
Really true?
It is true. Income inequality in Britain is lower than it was in 2010. We've now put on the table a huge range, and I think, Tristan, you'd agree with this, on childcare packages, massive support through universal credit on childcare to get all women back into work.
Quality of the provision, because when it comes to
We
childcare,
are
you've
now
got to have great workers
to pay for it, and you need a good economy to do that, which is what the Chancellor's after making sure that
we are out of
we
time.
spend
I'm
only
so
what we
sorry.
can earn.
Unless Iain Duncan Smith is going to give us a go on the spoons, we have no music, so that's all for today.